I get an Erev Shabbos, everybody. Welcome to Jerry's Parsha Ponderings for Parshat Shmot, 5783. Last week we were talking about the whole idea of the ghetto. And I mentioned that if you look in Merriam-Webster, or you look in or Britannica, or you look online, the word ghetto originates, an Italian word. It originated in Venice. The Venice ghetto is the original ghetto. There's a ghetto in Rome. Today, these places are very gentrified and tourist attractions where there are phenomenal restaurants. But to us Jews, when we think of a ghetto, what comes to mind is the Umschlagplatz, the Warsaw Ghetto. My grandfather, Zechrono Livracha, was from Warsaw, and to us, ghettos, equate with trains, gas chambers, and crematoria. So it's a negative word to most Jews. But we mentioned last week that the first ghetto was Goshen. Goshen was the first ghetto. The Yosef settled his brothers in Goshen. They were separated from the Mitzrayim, and that way they were able to maintain their heritage, their culture, their religion. But when we think of a ghetto, we usually come back to this whole idea of separateness. I was talking to a good friend, and we were talking about anti-Semitism, and he mentioned this could very well be the case, that throughout the years the Jews always separated themselves from their hosts, and they were in these ghettos, these shtetl, if you will, in Europe. Even in the Sephardic countries, there were places that were exclusively Jewish. If you go to Barcelona today, or a lot of the Sephardic country, also the Jews were ghettoed, for lack of a better term. And he mentioned that, whenever things go wrong, you always think about those weird people that don't eat with you, that don't mix with you, and, they immediately become the source, the scapegoat. If someone such and such is wrong, it must be the Jews, because they're not with us, they don't worship with us in church, they do their own thing, so they're the weirdos, let's blame them. But history has proven that really doesn't work that way, isn't it? Let's take a look at this week's Parsha. Uvenei Yisrael paru vayishritzu vayirbu v'ya'atzmu b'ma'od ma'od. They were fruitful and multiplied. Rashi says that there were multiple births. Maybe there were, maybe there weren't. Doesn't really matter. But the bottom line is that, as the dog runs by, but the bottom line is that they were very, very multiple. Again, they I can't come up with that word. They were very fruitful, very fruitful. Yeah. So it's interesting because the Parsha says "Vatimalei haaretz otam," that they broke through the ghetto, right? I mean, that's what the Parsha is telling us. They moved out of the ghetto. They left Goshen. They left Borough Park. They left, well, Lakewood is actually an offshoot of Borough Park. So they went out to the burbs, right? They moved to LA and to Chicago and to Englewood and Teaneck and Edison, and work your way down the New Jersey Turnpike and Garden State Parkway, Passaic, Chveisvust, Howell, Jackson. They moved out of the ghetto. So in this case, at least, it doesn't really seem to be that they were the oddball out. Yeah, they probably still had a big community in Goshen, but it was when they broke through the ghetto that stuff started going sideways, right? Vatimalei haaretz otam, vayakar melech chadash al Mitzrayim asher lo yada et Yosef. It wasn't when they stayed cloistered in their ghetto that there was a problem. It was when they started mingling. This goes very much against what I was discussing with this friend of mine who wanted to make the claim, well, you can't really say that because it was because they were separated from everybody else that caused the anti-Semitism. No, not at all. Let's take a look. We don't have to go back very far. I don't know. Let's go back about 80 years, 90 years. What was going on in the Weimar Republic? Remember, Hitler didn't go after the Jews of Poland initially. He went after the Jews of Germany and Austria. And then he figured, well, I'm at it. But were the German Jews, the Austrian German Jews, living in a ghetto? Not so much. They were living in Berlin. They were college professors. They were doctors. They were lawyers. They were accountants, Indian chiefs. All right? They were in every facet of society. Hardly walled off. Not at all. As a matter of fact, I believe, yes, Germany had a Jewish Secretary of State, foreign minister, before Henry Kissinger was ever heard of. So, and if you take the man at his word and bother reading Mein Kampf, you'll see that that wasn't his big issue with the Jews. It was quite the opposite. So, which is it? Is it because we remain separate? Or is it because we assimilate? Well, history seems to teach us, I'm not saying anybody's right or wrong, depends who you ask, right? But it seems that history is teaching us no. It's very much the opposite. It is when the Jews assimilate or attempt to that things go sideways, that anti-Semitism rears its head. We're taught in the Gemara, halacha hi biyadua she'esav saineas Yaakov. And if we look at Birchas Yaakov, or rather, right, Birchas Yitzchak, right? V'haya ki taridu farakta ulo me'al tzavarav. That says very much what history is teaching us. That when we try to shake off the yoke and try to be like everybody else, that is when the anti-Semitism chromosome kicks into high gear. It is certainly not when we remain separate and do our thing. So why is this? We don't know. Clearly, it was something that when HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world and humanity, this is something that was put into the creation. But we have to know that it is when we try to be too much like the Umot HaOlam that things are going to get rough. And we see Moshe Rabbeinu was born. He saw the Egyptian beating the Jew, and that sent him on his journey, right? That sent him on his journey. He killed the Egyptian. He hit him in the sand. And then it was another Jew who said, oh, you're going to hit me like you hit the Egyptian? Right? And Moshe was sent on his journey. It was that sense of justice, that sense of, I can't let this go on, that turned Moshe Rabbeinu into who he ultimately became. Let's remember, Abbasai, that, you see restaurants here in Eretz Yisrael, places that would otherwise be kosher, that think, oh, if we don't, we can't give up the Friday night tab. We can't give up being open on Saturday. You think they really make more money that way? Of course not. That's nonsense. When we try to be the other way, it never works out. When we stick to being who we are supposed to be, and we stand proud, and we say, no, this is who we are. We are the children of Avram, Yitzchak, of Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah. That's who we are. We don't have to apologize. We wear it proudly. And then we'll be respected. And when we're respected, then there will be real peace. Not by trying to show how much we're like everybody else. Rabbi Say Shabbos hi Makar HaBracha. Make it a wonderful Shabbos. Lots of gems in this week's Parsha. I only touched the very tip of the iceberg. You could talk for hours just on the sneh, on the bush, on Moshe's going down to Paro and speaking, the snake and the stick. Plenty to talk about. Enjoy the Shabbos. Talk about the Parsha. Enjoy your family. Have a wonderful Shabbat. Shabbat Shalom. A good Shabbos. A git gesinnt gebenchte Shabbos.